I discovered that Maple Ridge HOA was constructing 96 luxury homes on the farmland I had inherited. But when I uncovered my grandfather's original property surveys, their entire project suddenly became my legal property. You should have seen their faces when I revealed my trap at their own community meeting. I never imagined I'd have to fight for land that was already mine. When Grandpa Henry passed away last March, I inherited his 200-acre farm just outside Willow Creek, Oregon. The land had been in our family for generations. I lived far away in the city, working a demanding job that kept me from visiting as often as I should have. My phone rang at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. It was Mrs. Carter, Grandpa's neighbor for over 40 years. "They're building houses on your property," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "Big yellow machines started digging yesterday. You need to come quick." At first, I thought she must have been mistaken. Maybe construction crews had accidentally crossed the boundary line. But Mrs. Carter was not one to exaggerate. The Maple Ridge people put up signs everywhere. They're planning nearly 100 houses right on your east fields. I stuffed clothes into a suitcase and drove straight to Willow Creek, breaking speed limits the entire way. 5 hours later, I turned onto the dirt road leading to Grandpa's farmhouse. The familiar path felt different this time. The peaceful countryside was shattered by the rumble of heavy machinery. Dust clouds rose above the tree line. As I reached the hill overlooking the eastern section, my heart sank. Bulldozers and excavators were tearing into the soil where Grandpa once grew corn and soybeans. Workers in hard hats scurried around like ants, spraying bright orange lines across the ground. A massive sign stood near the road. "Future home of Maple Ridge East. 96 luxury homes starting at $450,000. I parked my car and approached a woman standing apart from the workers. She wore spotless beige pants and a crisp white blouse despite the dust swirling around. Her hair was perfectly styled, and she held a clipboard while talking on her phone. "Excuse me," I said as she ended the call. "What's happening here?" She gave me a quick up and down glance, as if I were a door-to-door salesman. "We're preparing for residential development," she replied smoothly. "Linda Harrington, president of the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association." She extended her hand without warmth. "This is my land," I said, ignoring her gesture. "My grandfather, Henry Dawson, owned this farm. He passed away recently, and I inherited it." Linda's smile didn't reach her eyes. "There must be some misunderstanding. Maple Ridge Development purchased this parcel last year. We have all the permits and approvals." "That's impossible. My grandfather would never sell this land." "Perhaps he didn't tell you," she said, almost sounding sorry. "The sale was finalized 9 months ago. We've been planning this expansion for years." My mind raced. Grandpa had been ill during his final months, but his mind stayed sharp. He would never have sold the farm he loved without telling me. Something was wrong. "I need to see those documents," I demanded. "You're welcome to contact our legal department." Linda Harrington handed me a business card. "But I assure you, everything is in order. Now, if you'll excuse me, we're on a tight schedule." She turned away, already dialing another number. I stood frozen, helpless, as machines ripped apart the soil that had fed my family for generations. Back at the farmhouse, Mrs. Carter was waiting on the porch with a pitcher of iced tea and a worried look. They started showing up with measuring tools about 3 months ago, she explained. Your grandpa was furious. He kept saying they had no right, that they were trying to steal what wasn't theirs. Did he ever mention selling the land? I asked. Never. Henry swore this farm would stay in your family forever. Her eyes glistened. The day before he went to the hospital, he was rummaging through his office, said he needed to find something important to protect the farm. Grandpa's office was untouched since his death. I hadn't had the heart to go through his belongings during the funeral. Now I needed answers. The small room smelled of pipe tobacco and old books. Shelves lined the walls, crammed with almanacs, photo albums, and decades of careful records. Where would he have kept property records? The filing cabinet seemed a logical place to start. I opened the top drawer and found folders neatly arranged by year. Nothing about land sales, nothing about Maple Ridge. Hours passed as I searched. Night fell, and my eyes strained as I read faded documents under lamplight. Just as I was about to give up, I noticed a loose floorboard beneath the desk. When I pressed it with my foot, it shifted slightly. Kneeling down, I pried it open with a letter opener. Inside was a small metal box. The key hung from a nail on the underside of the desk. Inside the box, I found the deed to the farm, Grandpa's will naming me as his heir, and several yellowed property surveys. But most surprising of all was a letter addressed to me in Grandpa's handwriting. "If you're reading this," it began, "then someone's trying to take what belongs to us." My hands shook as I read. Grandpa explained that developers had been circling his land for years. They pressured him to sell, but he always refused. In his final months, someone from Maple Ridge came repeatedly, claiming he only needed a quick signature for a road easement. Each time, the man brought new papers. "I never signed away my land," Grandpa wrote. "If they say I did, it's a lie. Look at the original survey from 1910 and compare it to the county records. The truth is in the boundaries." I dug deeper into the box and pulled out the original survey. To my shock, it showed property lines that stretched much farther than I had realized. According to this document, Grandpa's farm wasn't 200 acres, it was nearly 280. I couldn't sleep that night. I spread the papers across the kitchen table, comparing the old survey with newer maps. Over the decades, something had changed. The eastern boundary had shifted, reducing our land. And it wasn't just the area under construction. These records showed we owned part of the land where Maple Ridge had already built homes. At dawn, I knew what I had to do. First, I needed a lawyer. Then, I had to find out exactly what Linda Harrington and her HOA were planning. If they thought they could steal from my family, they were about to learn a hard lesson. I folded Grandpa's letter and slipped it into my pocket. "I won't let you down," I whispered to the empty room. Little did Linda know, she hadn't just tangled with a grieving grandchild. She had walked straight into a trap my grandfather had prepared long before. By 8 a.m., I was waiting outside the office of Walter Franklin, the only property lawyer in Willow Creek. His secretary looked startled when I asked for an emergency appointment, but she managed to fit me in before lunch. "So, you believe Maple Ridge is building on land that actually belongs to you?" Walter asked after I laid out the situation.
He was older than I'd expected, with thick glasses and a bow tie straight out of another era. I spread the documents across his desk. These are the original surveys from 1910, updated in 1978. Compare them to the current county records. Walter traced the boundary lines with his finger, his eyebrows climbing higher by the minute. "This is highly unusual," he said at last. "According to these original documents, your property extends nearly half a mile further east than what's currently recorded. That includes not only the construction site, but also the existing Maple Ridge clubhouse and about 20 homes built 5 years ago." "I know," I said quietly. Walter removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "A boundary dispute of this scale won't be simple. We need to figure out how and when the county records were altered." He called the assessor's office and put the call on speaker. After winding through several departments, we uncovered something shocking. In 1984, a minor adjustment to the eastern boundary had been recorded, a 10-foot easement for utilities. But in 1997, a much larger change appeared, reducing the property by nearly 80 acres. The paperwork was thin, just a single form with a signature that barely resembled Grandpa's. "He was in the hospital that month," I said, checking the date. "Triple bypass surgery. He couldn't have signed this." Walter's expression turned grim. "That would be fraud, but proving it after all these years won't be easy." "What can we do?" I asked. "File for an emergency injunction to halt construction immediately. Then petition the court to restore the original boundaries based on these historic surveys. We'll need a professional surveyor to verify them." As Walter began preparing the emergency filing, I realized I needed more ammunition. I drove to the county records office and pulled everything available on Maple Ridge Development. Hours later, hidden in the back corner of the public library, surrounded by stacks of records, I struck gold. Maple Ridge wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a tangled web of LLCs and shell companies. The same 6 names appeared over and over again. Linda Harrington, her husband Thomas Harrington, County Commissioner James Harris, Planning Board Director Mark Wilson, and 2 others I didn't recognize. The most eye-opening document was just 3 months old. A loan approval for $16 million to finance Maple Ridge East. The collateral listed, my land. I photographed everything with my phone and drove straight to the offices of the Willow Creek Gazette, our local newspaper. The editor, Tanya Williams, had known my grandfather. When I told her I was investigating possible fraud involving powerful local officials, her journalistic instincts kicked in. "I can't print accusations without solid evidence," she warned.
"But I can look into the approval process for this development," Tanya said. "It did seem to move unusually fast. Back at the farmhouse, I found Mrs. Carter speaking with another elderly neighbor. Mr. Grayson's face darkened when I mentioned Linda Harrington. 'That woman is the reason I sold my place,' he said bitterly. 'The HOA fined me every week for unapproved landscaping. I'd been growing those tomatoes for 20 years. Then they said my workshop violated some new rule they made up. The fines just kept piling up until I couldn't fight anymore.' 'How many others did this happen to?' I asked. 'At least a dozen old-timers sold out in the last 5 years,' he said. 'Always for less than market value. Always to companies later linked back to those Maple Ridge people.'
A pattern was clear. Target vulnerable landowners, bury them in fines and regulations, force them to sell cheap, then develop the land for millions. My grandfather had been their latest target, but he'd been one step ahead. My phone rang. It was Walter Franklin. "The judge granted our emergency injunction," he said. "Construction has to stop immediately until the hearing next week. But brace yourself, this is going to get ugly." I thanked him and hung up, savoring a small victory. I drove back to the construction site with the court order in hand. Workers were packing up for the day when I arrived. Linda's sleek black SUV still sat by the site office. She emerged as I approached, phone in hand as always. When she saw me, her expression hardened. "Construction stops now," I said, handing her the order. "Legal boundaries are in dispute." She scanned the document, her perfect composure faltering for a split second. "This is ridiculous. We have every approval we need, based on fraudulent boundaries. I have the original surveys." For the first time, uncertainty flickered in her eyes before hardening into cold resolve. "This little stunt will cost you," she said quietly. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Actually, I do," I replied. 6 names across dozens of business filings. 16 million in loans using stolen land as collateral. County officials fast-tracking approvals for projects they secretly invest in. Her manicured hand clenched her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. "You're making a mistake," she hissed. "We can be reasonable. Perhaps you'd consider a generous offer for the remaining farmland. 7 figures, immediate payment." "Not interested." "Everyone has a price." Her smile returned, sharp, predatory. "Think about it. You don't even live here. Why care about some old dirt?" "This old dirt has been in my family for 4 generations. It's not for sale." I turned to leave, her eyes burning into my back. "Commissioner Harris is my husband's golf partner," she called out. "Judge Evans dines at my house. You think your injunction will last? You're nobody in this town." I drove away, her words echoing in my head. She was right about one thing. I was an outsider here now. But she had overlooked something critical. Grandpa hadn't been. He'd lived in Willow Creek his whole life. Everyone knew and respected him, even those who didn't agree with him. And he'd left me more than just land. Back at the farmhouse, I returned to his office. If Grandpa had anticipated this fight, what else had he prepared? I searched carefully, every folder, every notebook. In an album labeled Community Picnic 2018, I found dozens of photos of Grandpa with neighbors, local shopkeepers, and families who'd known him forever. Each photo had names written on the back. These weren't just memories, they were connections, allies who might stand with me against Maple Ridge. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Parking violation at your property. Fine, $500. Maple Ridge HOA compliance." Attached was a photo of my car parked at Grandpa's farm. My own land. This was how it started, the harassment Mr. Grayson had described. But unlike the others, I knew their game now, and I had something they didn't expect. Grandpa's secret weapon, still hidden among his files, waiting for the right moment. As night fell over the farm, I sat on the porch where Grandpa used to tell me stories on summer evenings. The eastern fields lay quiet now, construction equipment abandoned under the court order. But I knew this was only the beginning. Tomorrow, Linda would rally her connections. The real fight was coming. What she didn't realize was that I had uncovered more than property surveys in Grandpa's hidden box. I had documents that didn't just question boundary changes. They revealed who had falsified them, when, and why. Linda thought she was facing a sentimental grandchild clinging to old dirt. In reality, she was facing the ghost of my grandfather, who had tracked every shady deal and corrupt approval for years, quietly building a case while they dismissed him as just a stubborn old farmer. The trap was set. All I had to do was let them walk further into it.
My heart pounded as I pushed open the grass doors of the Maple Ridge Community Center. Tonight was the night I had been preparing for weeks. Inside, nearly 100 people filled rows of folding chairs. They chatted excitedly about new tennis courts and elegant streets while sipping punch from plastic cups. At the front, Linda Harrington stood tall in her bright red blazer, pointing to colorful images of large homes projected on a screen. "Just imagine the swimming pool with its waterfall feature," she said with a wide smile. "Our property values will soar once these new neighbors arrive." Applause broke out. A few whistles echoed. Nobody realized that what I carried in my folder was about to ruin their celebration. I drew a deep breath and walked straight down the center aisle. "Excuse me," I said loudly enough to turn heads. "I need to speak about this development." Linda's smile faltered briefly, then returned, faker than ever. "We'll take questions after the presentation." "This can't wait," I replied, stepping onto the small stage. I faced the curious crowd. "My name is Alex Morgan. My grandfather owned Willow Creek Farm for 60 years. "The old property we purchased," Linda cut in quickly. "Yes, we're grateful to finally develop that eyesore." Murmurs rippled through the room. I opened my folder and pulled out the first document. "This is the original land survey from 1910, I said, holding it up. "And this is the updated survey from 1978. I raised another paper. "According to these legal documents, my grandfather's land extends 80 acres farther east than what's shown in current county records." I turned toward the HOA board members seated in a row behind the podium, placing copies in front of each of them. "Put simply," I continued, "you're building on land that legally belongs to me. And not just the new development. According to these boundaries, 20 existing homes and your clubhouse are sitting on my property too." The room erupted. People shouted, chairs scraped, voices overlapped in panic. "This is ridiculous," Linda snapped, snatching one of the surveys. "We have permits. We've sold lots. Construction has already started." I stayed calm while her face flushed red. "Your permits are based on fraudulent boundaries. I've already filed court papers to stop all construction immediately." Gerald Fisher, the HOA treasurer, a balding man with thick glasses, studied the documents with growing unease. "Linda," he muttered, forgetting the microphone was still live, "these boundary markers match the old creek bed. They look legitimate." She yanked the papers from his hands. "This is clearly a trick to extort us. We'll fight it." "You're welcome to try," I said, pulling out one final document. "But you should know, according to these legal boundaries, your personal house, Linda, sits entirely on what is legally my land." The room went silent. People looked at each other, realizing the weight of my words. 20 families might not even own the ground beneath their homes. A man in the back stood up. "Are you saying we could lose our houses?" Before I could respond, Linda slammed her palm on the podium. "This meeting is over. Everyone out. The board will discuss this privately." As the crowd shuffled away, whispering anxiously, a young woman approached me. "I'm Rachel Winters. I just spent my life savings on a lot in the new section. What happens to me?" I hadn't expected to face the human cost so directly. "I'm not trying to hurt regular people," I told her. "This is about correcting a wrong." "Don't listen to him," Linda hissed suddenly, appearing beside us. Once the room emptied, she leaned close, her voice sharp. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I built Maple Ridge from nothing. No one is taking it from me." Her threat hung in the air as she stormed out, leaving me alone in the echoing hall. Through the windows, I could see clusters of worried homeowners gathered in the parking lot. My phone buzzed, a text from Mr. Wallace. "How did it go?" I typed back, "They know now. Get ready for their next move." What I didn't admit was how shaken I felt. I had lit the fuse, but I wasn't sure I was ready for the explosion. These weren't just lines on a map. They were people's homes and dreams. But those dreams were built on my grandfather's stolen land. Someone was gonna lose everything, and Linda Harrington wasn't about to go down quietly. I jerked awake to the roar of engines outside Grandpa's farmhouse. Bright lights cut through the windows. Stumbling onto the porch, I saw 3 white SUVs parked across the driveway, Maple Ridge security painted on their doors. Men in uniform stood nearby. One stepped forward and handed me a thick envelope. "Cease and desist notice from the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association," he said flatly. "You are ordered to withdraw all claims against the development or face legal action." I tore it open. Inside was a letter accusing me of forging documents and attempting fraud. They demanded I pay damages for harming the community's reputation. "You can't be serious," I muttered. The guard only shrugged. "Just delivering the message. Have a nice day." He returned to his vehicle, but none of them left. When I tried to head into town for breakfast, I discovered that large concrete blocks had been placed across the end of my driveway overnight. "Sorry, sir," one guard said, his smirk betraying his words. "This access point hasn't been approved by the development committee. It's closed for safety reasons." I was trapped on my own property. I called the sheriff's office, but they claimed it was a civil dispute and suggested I hire a lawyer. Then my phone rang. Linda Harrington's name lit up the screen. I hadn't given her my number. "Good morning," she said sweetly, enjoying the view. "This is harassment," I snapped. "You can't block access to my property." "Actually," she replied smoothly, "according to county records, the real ones, that driveway crosses Maple Ridge's common areas. We're within our rights to control access. You know those records are wrong." She laughed. Let me explain how this works. The county commissioner golfs with my husband every Sunday. The building inspector's daughter works for my real estate company. The water department supervisor lives in Maple Ridge. By tomorrow, your farmhouse will be cited for at least 15 code violations. Your water might get shut off. Local contractors won't return your calls. They know better than to cross me. That's illegal. That's small-town politics, she countered. You can't win this, but I'm reasonable. Drop your claims, sign over the disputed acres, and it all goes away. I'll even throw in a generous payment for your trouble. This isn't about money. It's always about money, dear. Think it over. You have until tomorrow. She hung up. I stared at my phone, then at the security SUVs still parked outside. They weren't leaving. By afternoon, her threats proved real. A county inspector showed up at the farmhouse. He flagged everything: wiring, septic system, porch railings. He handed me a list of violations that would cost thousands to fix immediately. As he left, another truck arrived. Workers posted signs along my fence line. Future home of Maple Ridge East, luxury living coming soon. My water pressure dropped to a trickle. The utility company claimed there was maintenance, but couldn't say when service would be restored. That night, even ordering pizza failed. The delivery driver called to say he couldn't find my address. I was being cut off, step by step. I sat on the porch in darkness, watching security lights sweep across fields where Grandpa once grew corn. Their bulldozers sat silent, waiting to destroy his legacy. My phone buzzed with a message from Mr. Wallace. They filed a countersuit, claiming your documents are forged. Court date set for 3 months. They'll keep building in the meantime. 3 months. By then, half the houses would be finished, the damage irreversible. Scrolling through my contacts, one name caught my eye. Janet Rivera, a reporter for the local paper. We'd gone to high school together. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but maybe. Headlights appeared on the long driveway. A car carefully maneuvered around the concrete barriers and pulled up to the house. My chest tightened, expecting more trouble sent by Linda. But when the door opened, I recognized Gerald Fisher, the HOA treasurer who had studied my documents at the meeting. I shouldn't be here, he said nervously, glancing toward the security vehicles. If Linda finds out. Why are you here? I asked. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket. Because what she's doing isn't right. I've been keeping the HOA books for 7 years. There are things you need to see. I let him inside. At my kitchen table, Gerald opened his laptop and revealed financial records, meeting minutes, and emails. Linda and the board have been using HOA funds like their personal bank account, he explained. Special fees vanish. Contracts go to family members. Reserve funds are funneled into private businesses. Why show me this? Because I'm not the only unhappy homeowner, Gerald said. Many of us are tired of her rules and control. When you presented those property documents, it was the first time I'd seen her scared. He pointed to a spreadsheet. Look at these special assessments from last year. Every homeowner paid $2,000 for road repairs. The actual work cost half that. The rest disappeared. That's theft, I said. Gerald nodded grimly. And there's more. The 20 homes you identified as sitting on your land. The people who live there had been complaining about drainage problems for years. Linda kept promising fixes, but nothing ever happened. Now we knew why. She'd known all along those houses might not even legally belong to the HOA. As Gerald and I talked, my phone buzzed with texts from numbers I didn't recognize. "We support you against Linda. The Millers, 42 Maple Ridge Lane. She fined us $500 for planting vegetables instead of flowers. Can we help?" "Jackson family here. Our children's playground equipment was removed without notice. We want to join your fight." "The Rodriguezes." Gerald gave me a small smile. "I may have shared your number with a few friends." For the first time since this battle began, I felt real hope. Linda had power, connections, and money, but she had also made a lot of enemies. "We need a plan," I said, "and I think I know where to start." As Gerald left, carefully steering past the security vehicles, I stood by the window, watching light rain fall over the half-built houses in the distance. Linda thought she was breaking me down into surrender. Instead, she had just helped me find the allies I needed to win. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, I would stop playing defense. My grandfather always said, "The best trap isn't one your enemy walks into. It's one they help you build without even knowing it." Linda had just handed me the final pieces. The next morning, my water was cut off. By noon, the electricity followed. I stood in Grandpa's kitchen, staring at spoiled food inside a warm refrigerator. Linda Harrington thought she could bully me off my own land by making life unbearable. She was wrong. Notebook in hand, I headed out. If Linda wanted a war, I needed an army. The first person I visited was Mrs. Carter, who opened her door in a flowered housecoat. "They shut off your utilities," she gasped. "That's illegal." "So is building on my land," I replied. "But Linda has friends at the county office. I need to know who else hates the HOA as much as we do." Mrs. Carter's eyes lit up. "Oh, honey, grab a chair. This might take a while." She gave me 15 names. Families fined for the wrong color mailbox. Elderly couples threatened with liens for having their grandchildren over too often. A single mom who couldn't afford the $900 fee for putting up a small fence to keep her toddler safe. I spent the day knocking on doors across Maple Ridge. At first, people were scared to talk. But when I showed them my property documents, something shifted. Fear turned into hope. Sarah Jenkins, whose garden had been forcibly removed, poured me lemonade. "Linda made my husband dig up our tomato plants," she said, her hands trembling. "Vegetables weren't aesthetically pleasing. We got a $500 fine. My husband already works 2 jobs." The Patel family had spent $3,000 fighting the HOA over their porch swing. The Johnsons couldn't paint their front door the color they wanted. Every house looked exactly the same, beige with white trim. "It's not just the rules," explained Trevor Martinez, while his wife Maria nodded. "It's how they enforce them. Linda drives around taking pictures. Some people get warnings, others get instant fines. There's no fairness." By sunset, I'd spoken to 27 families. All had similar stories. All lived in fear of Linda Harrington. I called Mr. Wallace. "Can we legally form a competing homeowners association?" I asked. "On your land, absolutely," he said. "But what about the existing homes?" "That's where it gets interesting," I replied. "I'm gonna need the community center for a meeting tomorrow night." Wallace chuckled. "They'll never let you use it." "They don't own it. I do," I reminded him. "According to my property lines, remember?"
The next day, I printed 200 flyers. Emergency community meeting. Your home may be at risk. Each one included a copy of the original property survey. As darkness fell, the community center filled beyond capacity. 97 families showed up. People leaned against walls when the chairs ran out. Linda arrived last, shoving through the crowd, her face twisted with rage. "This meeting is unauthorized. Everyone leave immediately." Sarah Jenkins stood up. "Or what? More fines? Haven't you taken enough from us already?" The room erupted in applause. I stepped to the front and raised my hands for silence. "I didn't come here to cause trouble," I began. "I came because my grandfather's land was stolen. But after meeting all of you, I realized I'm not the only victim." For the next hour, residents told their stories of HOA abuse. Tears fell, voices cracked. Linda sat stiffly in the back, fingers flying over her phone. "Here's what I propose," I said when the room quieted. "We form the Willow Creek Homeowners Coalition. Together, we renegotiate property lines fairly. We write a new community agreement, reasonable rules, transparent finances." "You can't do that," Linda shouted. "These homes are bound by contract to Maple Ridge HOA. I held up the original land survey. Contracts based on fraudulent property ownership aren't valid, Mrs. Harrington."
But I wasn't here to take anyone's home. I was here to fix what was broken. The vote was nearly unanimous. 89 families joined the coalition on the spot. People left the community center energized and hopeful. Gerald Fisher, the HOA treasurer, approached me quietly. "There's something you should know," he whispered, glancing nervously at Linda across the room. "The HOA finances, they don't add up. Monthly dues keep rising, but our reserves keep shrinking. I've tried to investigate, but Linda controls all the accounts." I placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Would you be willing to show me the books?" He nodded. "Tomorrow morning, my office." Linda stormed over, jabbing her finger in my face. "You've made a terrible mistake. By this time tomorrow, you'll regret ever coming to Willow Creek." "Is that a threat, Miss Harrington?" I asked. "It's a promise. I've got the county commissioner, the police chief, and the local judge on speed dial. This little rebellion ends now." What she didn't know was that I had invited a reporter from the Willow Creek Gazette to sit quietly in the back of the meeting. Every word had been recorded, every threat documented. As Linda slammed the door behind her, my phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Wallace. "Environmental survey results came in. You won't believe what's on that land." I smiled. Linda thought she had all the power. But Grandpa always said the truth was the most powerful weapon of all. And tomorrow, the truth about Maple Ridge HOA would be front-page news. The next morning, I woke to flashing lights outside my grandfather's farmhouse. Police cruisers lined the driveway. Through the window, I saw Linda Harrington standing beside a tall man in uniform. "Time to face the music," she sneered as the police chief stepped forward. "You're trespassing on private property," Chief Williams announced as I opened the door. I smiled calmly. "Actually, Chief, you'll find I'm the legal property owner." I handed him a folder containing the original land surveys and my grandfather's deed.
"These documents haven't been verified," Linda snapped. "They have, actually," a woman's voice cut in. From a car I hadn't noticed, Carolyn Mitchell of the county records office stepped forward. "We pulled the original surveys last night after receiving some concerning reports." Linda's face paled. "What reports?" I gestured toward the farmhouse. "Perhaps we should discuss this inside." 15 minutes later, my kitchen table hosted an unexpected gathering. The police chief, Carolyn from the records office, Mr. Wallace, and Linda, whose perfect makeup couldn't hide her growing panic. The original property lines were improperly recorded in 1973, Carolyn explained, spreading maps across the table. The police chief whistled. "That's quite a mistake." "Not a mistake," Mr. Wallace said quietly. "We have evidence suggesting the boundary change was deliberate." "Ridiculous!" Linda slammed her hand on the table. "This is a scam to extort money from hard-working homeowners." "Speaking of money," I said, sliding a folder toward the chief. "Gerald Fisher provided these financial records yesterday. 3 years of Maple Ridge HOA accounts." As the chief flipped through the pages, his expression hardened. "Ms. Harrington, can you explain why $427,000 in homeowner dues was transferred to Sunshine Consulting, LLC?" "That's our legitimate management company," she replied stiffly. "Registered to your son-in-law," I added, "along with 4 other companies billing the HOA: landscaping, security, maintenance, legal counsel, all owned by your family." The chief closed the folder. "Ms. Harrington, you'll need to come down to the station." "This is absurd. Do you know who I am? My husband plays golf with Judge Evans every Sunday." As the chief escorted a protesting Linda out, Carolyn turned to me. "What happens now? What about those people's homes?" "I have no intention of evicting anyone," I assured her. "But the development stops until we can properly survey the wetlands." By afternoon, construction had halted. Local news vans lined the road outside the farmhouse. My phone rang constantly with calls from anxious homeowners. I called an emergency town hall at the high school auditorium, the only space big enough. Nearly 400 people packed the room. Homeowners, construction workers suddenly without jobs, county officials, curious locals. Fear and anger buzzed in the air. I took a deep breath and stepped to the microphone. "My name is Alex Morgan. This was my grandfather's land. I didn't come here for a fight." Shouts cut me off. "What about our homes? We'll sue! My life savings is tied up in that house." I raised my hands. "Please, I'm not here to take anything from you. In fact, I want to offer a solution that helps everyone." The crowd quieted. "First, all existing homeowners will receive proper legal deeds. No one will lose their home." Murmurs of relief spread through the auditorium. "Second, the new development will be redesigned to protect the wetlands my grandfather cherished. These aren't just swamps. They're critical habitats and natural flood protection for all of Willow Creek." I clicked to the next slide, showing Grandpa's environmental studies.
These wetlands are home to 3 endangered species. Building on them isn't just wrong, it's illegal under federal law. A man rose from the audience. I put my life savings into a lot in the new section. What happens to my investment? A fair question, I replied. We're establishing a property exchange program. Anyone who purchased in the protected area can swap for an equivalent lot in the redesigned development. No one loses their investment. For the next hour, I laid out the vision, a community that balanced homes with nature, transparent governance, reasonable rules, and fair dues that actually funded improvements rather than lining pockets. Near the end, Sarah Jenkins stepped to the microphone. I've lived under Linda's rules for 8 years. I couldn't paint my door blue. I couldn't grow tomatoes. My kids couldn't play outside after 7 p.m. because it violated the noise ordinance. She turned, scanning the room. Is that really the community we want? Applause thundered through the auditorium. By the time the meeting ended, over 300 residents had signed to support the new Willow Creek Community Association. Even some of Linda's old allies defected, including Gerald Fisher, who agreed to help unravel the tangled finances. The next 6 months were a trial by fire. Linda hired top-dollar attorneys who tried every legal maneuver to overturn our claims. But the surveys, the financial records, and the eyewitness testimony were too strong. Cornered, she accepted a plea deal on fraud charges. 1 year later, I sit on my grandfather's porch watching children ride bikes down the lane. Doors painted every color of the rainbow flashing in the sun. The community garden, where Sarah's tomatoes climb tall, hums with neighbors trading seeds and recipes. Behind me, Grandpa's farmhouse has become our community center, alive with classes, meetings, and celebrations. The wetlands are safe now, protected under a conservation easement. Walking trails wind through cattails and willows. Wooden signs tell the stories of each plant and animal that call the marsh home. Mrs. Thompson joins me on the porch with 2 glasses of lemonade. Your grandfather would be bursting with pride, she says, nodding toward the redesigned homes rising beyond the trees. Smaller footprints, wider yards, solar panels glittering on every roof. I found something in his study while cleaning, I tell her, opening a worn leather notebook. Grandpa's journal from 30 years ago. He fought the original developers back then, too, when they first tried to drain the marsh. Mrs. Thompson smiles. He always said you were just like him, stubborn as a mule when it came to fighting for what's right. In the distance, a blue heron rises gracefully from the marsh, its wings cutting across the sunset. It soars above homes where families now live, not in conflict with the land, but in harmony with it. Sometimes the best trap isn't about catching someone doing wrong. It's about showing them a better way to do right. Linda's HOA tried to steal my land. Instead, they gave me something far more valuable. A stronger, freer community.